Hello and welcome to this Bio43 pre-lab video. Over the next few weeks, we are going to discuss effective science writing as you begin the first draft of your lab report. Today's focus will be on the introduction. But before we get into the specifics of the introduction, I want to talk about the structure of our writing rubric. There are 5 categories listed here: argument, evidence, interpretation, authority, and structure/prose. Some categories focus on specific sections of the paper, like argument on introduction, evidence on results, and interpretation on discussion. The other categories, authority and structure/prose, deal with the entire paper. Your introduction will be graded based on the argument, authority, and structure/prose categories. All points listed under argument will be relevant, but some things under authority won't apply until future sections. Presenting the significance and implications of the experiment, demonstrating critical engagement through understanding of the discipline, and properly using background sources will be important for the introduction. But you'll only barely touch on the methods here, and won't have experimental outcomes yet. Each category will be scored based on proficiency level. The rubric defines the 5 levels: exemplary, proficient, developing, borderline, and inadequate. Look over the rubric carefully for a clear understanding of what we're looking for at each proficiency level. Over the course of the semester, we expect you to progress from developing and borderline to mostly proficient levels. Our grading will reflect that expectation. For your first writing assignment, achieving developing scores across all categories will give you a grade of A-. By the time you turn in your final assignment of the semester, all developing scores will result in a C-level grade. Exemplary is a high bar most students won't consistently reach until their senior thesis, but a mix of proficient and exemplary scores will earn a high A grade. When writing your lab report, it is important to know who your audience is. Your classmates may read it as part of peer review, and of course your instructor will read it, but do not think of them as your audience. Write this for Bio43 students in their first week of lab. They've been given the basic overview of cilia structure and function, but haven't read any articles on the topic yet. Our goal for the future of this course is to eventually gather a pool of student reports we can provide to Bio43 students so they can build upon our research over the years. Think of yourself as writing a Bio43 primary research article. It should be as close as possible to a professional published research article. Now let's get into the specifics of writing an introduction. The structure of the introduction can be generally described as an inverted triangle, starting with very broad information and gradually becoming more specific. Begin with the big picture. Why are you doing this study? Why should others be interested in this? Open with a good hook that captures a reader's attention and makes them want to continue. Then go into the background necessary for understanding your hypothesis. This part shouldn't just read as a list of facts. It should tell a coherent story of how previous research has led to your hypothesis. If you're unsure about what background information to include, look at your hypothesis and experiment and break them into distinct parts, each of which you can explain in a few sentences. Why these dependent and independent variables? Why this direction for the effect? Why this mechanism? Why this model system? And so on. Then clearly state your hypothesis, which should be well justified by the background you've given leading up to this. Next, you'll need to give a brief description of your experiment, just enough to provide the context to connect your hypothesis to your prediction. So we've gone from the very broad, big picture idea to the highly specific prediction for your particular experiment. The background you provide in the introduction comes from the work of others, so it's necessary to cite them appropriately. Only research articles and reviews should be cited here. Textbooks, instructor slides, websites, etc. aren't good sources. Though this doesn't mean websites are useless. A good Wikipedia article will cite its claims and link you to the original research article it's based on for you to check out yourself. You should credit the previous research in 2 places. The first is in the text right after you present the work. There are multiple ways to do this, but in Intro Bio, we use parenthetical citations. At the end of the sentence where you describe their work, but before the period, put the author names and year of publication in parentheses. The exact formatting depends on the number of authors. With one author, just include their last name, comma, the year. For two authors, it's last name, comma, year. And for three or more authors, just give the first author's last name, followed by et al., comma, the year. Et al. Is an abbreviation of the Latin phrase et alia, meaning and others, so be sure to put the period after all. This parenthetical citation doesn't always have to go at the end of the sentence. It could go at the end of a clause before the comma. Or if you name the authors in the sentence itself, you can just put the publication year in parentheses after the names. If you continue describing the same work over multiple sentences in a row, you only need to cite the paper after the first time. But if you bring up the work again in a later paragraph, you should cite again. These in-text citations don't provide enough information for a reader unfamiliar with the field to look up your sources, but do allow the reader to find the full citation in the Literature Cited section at the end of the paper. Full citations have lots of information and very specific formatting that varies from journal to journal. Let me walk you through this helpfully color-coded example of how we do the formatting in Intro Bio. First is the list of authors in the same order they're presented in the paper. Last names followed by first initial and middle initial if provided. Commas between authors, ampersand before the last author, period at the end of the list. Next comes the publication year, in parentheses and followed by a period. The article title followed by a period. Next, the journal name, fully written out, followed by a comma. Then the volume number of the journal. Some journals also have issue numbers. If that's the case, follow the volume number directly with the issue number in parentheses. Otherwise, just skip it. Following the volume, and issue if applicable, there's a colon and then the page range for the article. First dash last, followed by a period. Finally, you should include the DOI, or Digital Object Identifier. This unique code makes it easy to find the referenced article just by putting it into a search engine. Older articles may not have a DOI, but with newer articles, you can find it on the top of its PubMed entry, or just by searching for DOI on the PDF. The journal name, volume, and issue numbers are all in italics. Everything else should be in a regular font. Arrange your list of citations in alphabetical order based on the first author's last name. That does it for this video. I hope you now feel prepared to write the introduction for your first report. Remember to also reference your writing guide and rubric while you write. See you next time.